There is a lake in the heart of the Riverlands, so wide the far shore vanishes into haze. The small folk call it the God's Eye. On its bank stands a haunted castle, and from that castle, a man has been sending the same message for 13 days. A challenge: come and die. On the 14th day, the sky answers. A dragon larger than any living thing in the world climbs into the dusk. Vhagar, the last dragon of the conquest. And up to meet her goes a lean red beast with an old killer on its back. A man who has not buckled his saddle because he does not mean to come down alive. They are uncle and nephew. They have hated each other across a whole war. And when their fire lights the clouds, men a dozen miles off will believe the heavens themselves have caught flame. When it is over, a queen will lose her last protector, and a year of dying will begin that ends with 3 crowns in the grave, and the dragons themselves all but gone from the world. Welcome to Westeros Within, where the fires of history still burn. This is House of the Dragon, the true history. Chapter 8. The Dying of the Queens. This is the story of how the Dance of the Dragons finally ended, not in triumph, but in fire over a lake, a queen fed to a dragon, poison in a golden cup, and the cold justice of the North. When we left him, Daemon Targaryen had ridden from King's Landing on the Blood Worm, hunting Aemond One-Eye through the burning Riverlands. The prince who had killed his stepson Lucerys. The prince who rode ancient Vhagar. Daemon took the cursed castle of Harrenhal, and from its towers he sent his challenge. Then he waited. 13 days, carving a mark into the weirwood heart tree for each one, the way a man counts down to something already decided. On the 14th day, Aemond came. He did not come alone. He had brought Alice Rivers, the witch-woman of that haunted place, his lover, and some say already carrying his child. And before he climbed onto Vhagar's back, the proudest kinslayer of the war did one tender thing in his short and bloody life. He kissed her goodbye. Then the dragons rose. Vhagar climbed slowly, in widening circles over the lake. Caraxes was smaller, but quick, and Daemon held him high into the glare of the setting sun, on Aemond's blind side, where the sapphire once sat. And then he dove. They met in the air, and the air caught fire. Caraxes' jaws closed on Vhagar's neck. Her claws tore away a wing. Locked together, the two began to fall. And as they fell, Daemon swung a leg over his saddle and leapt from one falling dragon to the other. He landed on Vhagar's back, tore the helm from his nephew's head, and drove Dark Sister down through Aemond's blind eye, so hard the point came out the back of the young prince's throat. All 4 struck the water together. Caraxes crawled ashore and died beneath the walls. Vhagar sank, and years later, when men dredged the lake, they found her bones at the bottom. Aemond's armored skeleton still chained to the saddle. Dark Sister still hilt deep through the eye, but of Daemon Targaryen, they found nothing at all. His body was never recovered, and because the most famous warrior of the age simply vanished into the deepest water in Westeros, the songs began, that he survived the fall, that he lived out his days in secret, that he found his way back to the wild girl Nettles and her brown dragon. The maesters dismissed them. Charming songs, they say, not history, but they cannot give you a body. And so the doubt remains, the way it always remains over a man who was never found. While Daemon burned over the God's Eye, his wife was running for her life. We left Rhaenyra watching her own city tear her dragons apart. Now she fled it, taking ship at Duskendale aboard a Braavosi cog, the Violand, with a few loyal ladies and her young son, bound for the one place she still believed was hers, Dragonstone, the island where the dance began. She did not know that Dragonstone had already fallen. For months, while the realm hunted a fugitive king, Aegon II had been hiding in the last place anyone would look, his enemy's own island. Smuggled out of King's Landing by Larys Strong the Clubfoot, the broken king had crept to the Dragonmont with his crippled dragon Sunfyre, healing in secret while his agents bought the garrison out from under Rhaenyra's nose. And the garrison turned. Sir Alfred Broom, bitter he was never made Castellan, sold the castle. They killed the loyal Castellan, seized the ravens so no warning could fly, and slew Rhaenyra's own Grand Maester. Only one defender rose against the king, Daemon's daughter, the young lady Rhaenyra Targaryen, on her dragon Moondancer. She was swift and brave, and she wounded the crippled Sunfyre badly. But the golden beast was too large. He blinded her dragon with a blast of flame. The two crashed together, and on the ground, Sunfyre killed and devoured Moondancer. Rhaenyra fell, burned but living. And when Broom moved to finish her, a knight named Marston Waters wrenched the sword from his hand. Remember that small mercy. It will matter at the very end. So when the Violande came into port, Dragonstone flew false colors. Rhaenyra was not sailing home. She was sailing into her brother's hands. She had been the realm's delight once, the most beautiful girl in the 7 kingdoms, silver gold of hair, purple of eye, born to rule. The woman who climbed the path that day was none of those things. Grief had aged her past her years, her father dead, her husband Daemon gone into the lake, 4 of her sons in the ground, her golden Syrax slain in the riot. She was 33, gaunt and hunted, with no dragon left in all the world. Sir Alfred Broom met her on the shore with 40 men. As she climbed, she passed the bodies of her own loyal servants. Her 3 Queen's Guard reached for their swords and were cut down before they understood that the castle itself had betrayed them. And then her brother revealed himself. Aegon II was carried out in a chair, unable to stand, half his body ruined by the fire he had taken, leaping from a dying dragon at Rook's Rest. The king and the queen who had torn a realm in half spoke at last, face to face, for the first and only time in the whole war. Quick, the chroniclers say, and chillingly courteous. Rhaenyra told him she had hoped he was dead. And Aegon answered, "After you. You are the elder." Then he passed his sentence. His half-sister would die by dragon. Sunfyre lay in the castle yard, grievously wounded, half-rotted, the splendor of him gone. At first, the dragon would not even look at her. So Broom stepped forward and pricked the queen's breast with his dagger, and the blood and the movement finally roused the beast. Sunfyre devoured Rhaenyra Targaryen in 6 bites. When it was done, there was nothing left of the queen but her left leg, below the knee. And standing on that cold beach, made to watch every moment of it, was a boy of 10 years, Prince Aegon the Younger, Rhaenyra's last living child, forced to see his mother eaten alive before him. One of her ladies, they say, gouged out her own eyes rather than look upon it. We cannot know if it is true. We know only what it tells us, that the horror of that beach reached out and broke the people who saw it. The boy it broke most, they did not kill. He was worth too much alive, a hostage against his mother's friends. They chained him and threw him into the dungeons. He would be a king one day. But the histories agree on one thing about him from that day forward. He never smiled again. The sources quarrel over the queen's last moments. Septon Eustace, who never loved her, says she laughed when she saw the ruined dragon, defiant to the last, the god's judgment on a kinslayer. The fool Mushroom says she did not laugh at all, but mourned the war she had loosed upon the world. Laughing or weeping, the end was the same. On the 22nd day of the 10th moon, in the year 130, the queen who had fought for the Iron Throne her whole life was fed to a dragon by her own brother, and the realm called it justice or murder, depending on who held the pen. But the war did not end with her death. Far to the west, the Greens still held the ruined town of Tumbleton, and there the last great clash of the dance was fought in a single squalid night. You will remember the two betrayers, the low-born dragon riders who turned their cloaks and burned Rhaenyra's host, Hugh Hammer, the dark-haired bastard giant on Vermithor, who had crowned himself in black iron and dreamed of a throne, and Ulf the White, the drunkard on Silverwing, ruling Tumbleton like a petty king. The Green Lords came to despise them, and a cabal who called themselves the Caltrops quietly resolved to murder them both. They never got the chance to do it cleanly. Because one night, the Blacks struck first. His name was Adam Velaryon, a bastard boy of Hull, legitimized and raised up, rider of the dragon Sea Smoke. When the betrayers turned traitor, suspicion had fallen on him too, simply for sharing their low-born blood. He fled King's Landing not to betray the Queen, but to prove she was wrong about him, to prove, in his own words, that not all bastards need be turncloaks. He came back to Tumbleton in the dark with 4,000 rivermen and fell on the drunken host like a thunderclap. In the chaos, the would-be kings died as they had lived. Hugh Hammer, rushing for his dragon, was cut down in the mud short of the saddle. Gutted by a lord's Valyrian blade, his iron crown bought him nothing. And Ulf the White slept through the whole battle, too sodden with wine to wake, while men died around him. He survived the slaughter only to be poisoned afterward, over a cup brought by one of the Caltrops, who drank from it too, and died beside him. A would-be king, dying over a poisoned cup. Hold onto that. The realm was about to do it again, to a real one. But the cruelest loss of that night took to the sky. 3 dragons were loose above the burning town. Tessarion, the blue she-dragon of young Prince Darren, the gentle boy who had tried to halt the sack, dead now in the confusion, by a sellsword's morning star or a collapsing tent. The sources cannot agree. Sea Smoke, Adam's mount, and the riderless Vermithor, enraged and masterless, burning both armies without care for which colors the men wore. Adam made his choice. He turned Sea Smoke from the smaller dragon and threw him at the great old beast to pull that fire off his own men. And he must have known it was death to try. All 3 came down together and tore each other apart in the mud and smoke. Vermithor ripped the head from Sea Smoke, then collapsed and died of his wounds. Tessarion was mortally hurt and did not last the night. And Adam Velaryon died on his dragon's back, the dragon seed who chose loyalty, when loyalty cost him everything. 3 more dragons gone in a single night. Tumbleton burned to nothing, and the last great host of the war was finished. The dance was guttering out. So at the last, only one king was left standing, and he had won nothing. Aegon II came home to King's Landing, a ruin of a man. His brothers dead, his son dead, his dragon Sunfyre dying. Carried everywhere in a litter, his legs shattered, his body burned. He drowned his pain in milk of the poppy and sweet arbor red. He had outlasted every rival, and inherited a bled-white realm that hated dragons and had no love left for him. And the war still would not end. A northern host was marching down the King's Road, and the river lords were closing on the capital. So the great lords found their peace without him. They would crown the boy, Rhaenyra's son, Aegon the Younger, and wed him to Aegon II's only surviving child, the little princess Jaehaera. One child from each side of the house, married into a single throne. The war would end in a wedding. Only one man stood in the way of it, the king himself. His own hand, the old sea snake Corlys Velaryon, urged him to abdicate and take the Black. Aegon refused and talked instead of resuming the war. He did not get the chance. After a council meeting, the king was carried to his litter, gray and sagging, and along the way he drank from his customary flagon of sweet arbor red. He told his kingsguard to bear him not to his chambers, but to the sept. And when the litter arrived, and the knight got no answer to his questions, he threw back the curtains. He found the king dead upon his cushions, with blood upon his lips. Thus died Aegon of House Targaryen, the second of his name. He had lived 24 years, and reigned for 2. And here is the great unanswerable question of the dance. Who poisoned the wine? The hand that poured it was never found, and never will be. For by then, half the realm had reason to want him dead. The Maester who set down this history names his suspect plainly. The deed, he writes, was done at the behest of Larys Strong the Clubfoot, the master of whisperers who had threaded this whole war from the shadows. And yet, Larys was one of the few men who had truly served Aegon, who spent a year keeping him alive, smuggling him from the city, hiding his children. He gained nothing by the king's death, and would soon lose his head for it. The men who profited were the peacemakers, Corlys Velaryon, and the lords who put the boy king on the throne the moment Aegon stopped breathing. So, believe the chronicle, and blame the clubfoot. Or follow the gold, and ask who walked into power over the king's body. The truth died with Aegon in that litter, and no confession ever quite reached it. A king who fed his sister to a dragon, dying quietly over a cup of wine, alone behind a curtain, and no one in the world to mourn him. Into that broken city rode the North. Lord Cregan Stark of Winterfell came down the King's Road with a host of grim warriors they called the Winter Wolves, old men and younger sons seeking a glorious death rather than a slow one in the coming winter. Cregan was young, hard, and honorable to the bone, and he had marched all this way for one thing: battle and vengeance for the queen he had sworn to serve. He arrived to find the war already over, the king poisoned, the peace already made in the quiet by men with clean hands. And Cregan Stark was disgusted. He had wanted his enemy beaten in the open, not murdered behind a curtain. So he turned his fury into justice. Named Hand of the King to the boy not yet crowned, he seized the capital and arrested 22 men for their part in the king's death, Larys Strong among them, the Grand Master who confessed to providing the poison, and the old sea snake Corlys Velaryon himself. For Corlys, the realm pleaded. Daemon's daughters, Baela and Rhaenyra, begged for his life. And to make the pardon hold, a Blackwood lady agreed to wed Cregan Stark himself. Corlys had confessed to conspiring against Aegon, he said, for the good of the 7 kingdoms. He was spared, restored, seated on the new king's council. The man who had lost all 3 of his grandsons to this war, Jace, Luke, and Joffrey, outlived nearly everyone who started it, and walked into the regency, the coldest winner of the dance. The rest were given a choice, the wall or the block. 19 took the black. Only 2 chose to die, and one was Larys Strong the Clubfoot, who would not confirm the king's slaying and would not deny it, and went to his death with his secrets intact. following the old way of the North, that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, Cregan took up the stark greatsword Ice and struck off both their heads himself. The clubfoot, who had arranged so many deaths from the shadows, finally arranged for nothing, and lost his head in the open beneath a stark blade. Cregan served as hand for a single day after the executions. Then he handed back his chain, turned his horse north, and rode home to Winterfell, declining all the power the realm would have heaped upon him. The wolf came south, cut out the rot, and refused to stay and rule. And so the dance of the dragons ended. Not with a victory, with a coronation in the ashes. They crowned the broken boy, Aegon the Younger, the child who had watched a dragon eat his mother, King Aegon III, beside the burned bones of the dragon pit. They wed him to little Rhaenyra, the only child Aegon II had left, a girl who had watched her own brother murdered before her eyes a war ago. Two broken children wed over a realm of corpses to make one piece out of two ruined houses. He grew into his names like a man pulling on mourning clothes. Aegon, the unlucky. Aegon, the unhappy. The broken king. And at the last, the name that mattered most. Aegon, the Dragonbane. For he feared the great beasts to the end of his days, and under his reign, the last of them would dwindle and die. His mother's killer went first. Sunfyre, once the golden splendor of the realm, never healed. He wasted away, too crippled to move, refusing to eat. The dragon that devoured a queen, ending in nothing. Here is what the dance truly cost. When it began, there were near 20 living dragons in the world. When it ended, there were 4. And of the 4 that survived, only one, a hatchling named Morning, the lone dragon born during all that dying, was bonded to a living Targaryen. The rest were wild things. The cannibal, who had never known a rider, and a brown dragon called Sheep Stealer, vanished into the mountains of the moon with a bastard girl named Nettles, never seen again. The war settled nothing. It did not prove who deserved the throne or whose claim was true. It proved only one terrible thing the realm could never afterward unlearn: that dragons could be killed, and that men would kill them. The age of dragons did not end on that bloody beach, or in that poisoned litter, or beneath a stark sword. But this is where it began to die. A child king who hated the fire on a throne of melted swords, in a realm where the great beasts were guttering down to a handful of wild flames in the dark. That is the true history of the Dance of the Dragons. Not a song of heroes, but the tale of a family that had everything, and burned it all rather than yield a single inch. I am Westeros within. If these old fires have burned for you across these 8 chapters, then subscribe and stay by the hearth, for the dragons are not finished dying, and there are darker, older tales still waiting in the ash. The fires of history are never truly out. The dance is told, but the night is long, and Westeros is full of ghosts.